Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our sixth and final lecture of the class. I'm going to go through our announcements and then talk about our final that we are going to be doing to end the course, and then go through our discussions for this week. So the first announcement, there will be an optional Zoom discussion this Tuesday, back to our normal Tuesday time at 5:15. This will be our last discussion to go over perusal, but I'm thinking about doing a Zoom in case people want to share their special projects. So let me know if you'd be interested in doing another Zoom after that, probably on the 19th, to share your presentation for your special projects. As far as perusal discussions and leaders, we do have our last two this week, but I do encourage you to go back, view your scores. If you click on your score, you will see a breakdown of how your score was calculated. That way, if you want to go back and add on, it will show you exactly what you need to add on to, whether it be reading more of the content, adding an annotation to a different part of the content. So you can go back and continue to add on to your perusal until July 19th. So you are able to do that. And then again, discussion leaders have done some really great presentations. So do check those out. A lot of them have also been over the supplemental text, which is really great. If you didn't get a chance to read those, to go look at the presentations, to get a little bit of insight about those supplemental articles. So last week, everyone submitted their special topic proposal. So I did give everyone feedback on iCollege. So go back into your assignments tab in iCollege, click on the assignment, and you'll be able to view my feedback. If you want to write something back, you can enter it as another submission. I'll get it and we can write back and forth there, or you can reach out via email. But several of you have already submitted an additional question or something else through a second submission, and that is the perfect way to do it. As far as your second reflections, I have finished giving everyone feedback on those. Again, they were just so insightful, just a joy to read. I gave everyone personalized feedback. So do go into iCollege again, click on the assignment tab, click on that assignment with the same place where you submitted reflection number 2, and read that feedback. I really appreciate all of your passion, your discussion, your engagement. Like I said, really enjoyed reading the reflections. I kind of went through a lot of, some of them made me very emotional, some of them made me smile, so they were really great. And if you are interested in some of the themes from the reflections, go to last week's lecture. I have a little chapter in there where I go through some of the common themes that came through in the second reflections. Okay, so my next major announcement has to do with our final assignment, the special topics project. Now, this is going to be the final for the course. So this is a 7-week course. We've done 6 weeks of discussions, and then the 7th week and the finals week is going to be your final. So we're not going to have a final exam. Instead, it's going to be a presentation and a paper. And everyone has already started because you've already done the first step, which is come up with your idea. So that's what we submitted last week, your proposal. And so I did give feedback maybe about how to narrow it. And if you want to talk about that, please do reach out to me. So for the special topics project, I talked a little bit about this in the very first lecture. It's in the syllabus, but I wanted to take a moment just to talk a little bit about it now, because it is your final and it is worth a quarter of your grade. So the purpose of the special project is to expand what we are considering in this course, since it is a limited course. And then even if it wasn't a limited course, it's impossible to talk about every relevant issue when it relates to the social and cultural foundations of education. So I'm asking you to choose something that is either your interest, your area expertise, hopefully both, and investigate this topic, look at some research articles already written about it, explore this area, and present it to the class and write a paper. So the first part of the assignment is they're both about the same thing. So I'm going to talk about them separately, but again, it's about the same topic. So the presentation is going to be the same format that you did for your discussion leader videos, either Google Slide or a PowerPoint with voiceover. Either way that you did that, or even Zoom, how I do now, if you want to do that as well. There have been some people who use video, so thank you so much for that. And it is an 8 to 10 minute video, not too many slides, just giving an overview of your topic, what you learned, what the most critical issues about that topic are. And then the second part is a paper, and this is worth 15 of those 25 points. Now the paper is not long, 4 to 6 pages, so you really have to keep it tight in terms of making sure that you're hitting the key points, but again, it is a confined space. Of course, I'm okay if you go over a little bit, but that's just to keep in mind. It's a brief overview of going into some of the most relevant issues involved with it. Now, as you're developing this paper, you need to consult at least 3 to 5 academic sources. So using the Georgia State Library or Google Scholar, logging in with your Georgia State credentials, looking at an academic journal or academic book to support your topic. And then you can also use course materials or relevant media sources and even your own experience. So what I recommend doing when you craft your paper is start off with an introduction about the issue. So give us some background about the issue, talk about maybe the history of it, key terms, anything that you need to introduce the topic. Then for the body of your paper, go into several key components that either came up in your literature search or in some of the media articles to discuss the key issues involved with your topic. So probably 2 to 4 key issues that you will discuss related to your topic. And then a conclusion. In your conclusion, it could be based on the different topic. It could be a variety of things. It could be next steps. It could be your opinion about a policy. It could be a call to action. So that's how I suggest forming your paper. Of course, it's going to be different based on your topic. So if you are getting stuck, please reach out and I can help guide you on how to break down that paper, how to format that paper and structure the paper. And then the presentation is the same exact format. It's following the same information. So I made 2 separate due dates, so you're not doing it all at once to kind of make it a little bit easier and spread it out. But so the week of the 20th, this is Wednesday, July 20th. This is the 7th week of the course. And then this is the finals week, the 26th. Now, I originally had thought you could do the presentation first on the 20th. This will be published on iCollege where everyone in the class can see it. That way you can go through, you can look at your classmates' special topics, learn from them. And then the paper is submitted to me. Now, some people might want to share the paper with the whole class. That's perfectly fine. You can upload that as well to the whole class. So I had originally thought, presentation first and then paper. If it makes more sense to you to write the paper first and then the presentation, you can switch these due dates. So on the 20th, you'll either be turning in the presentation or the paper, and then on the 26th, you'll be turning in the other piece. So just based on how you work best or what makes sense to you, you can decide which one is easier for you to do first. So let me pause for a moment. I want to show you where you are going to upload these assignments and where you can find more details and assignment descriptions. Okay, so I am in iCollege. So if you go to assessments right here, assignments, this is where you can find the assignments and read the feedback that I was telling you about. If you go to content, here's where you will see all of the lectures that I posted, the introduction, discussion 1, discussion 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 that we're going to do this week. And then at the end, we have conclusion, course summation. And this is where you will find the 2 assignments that go with your final project. So the first one is the presentation and then the paper. So the final presentation is another discussion board, exactly the same as the discussion leaders, except this one is going to be your work. So this is going to be what you have investigated, what you have learned. So you'll start a new thread. You can put the topic of your presentation and your name, and then you can attach your presentation, whether it be a Google slide, a PowerPoint. And if you want to attach your paper, you are more than welcome to do so here as well. Now you'll be able to go in and view each other's presentations, leave a comment, I've seen so much fabulous dialogue on perusal, so feel free to do that here with your classmates in their presentations and give them feedback about what you thought. And then the paper here is the details, the same thing that I'm looking at for those when I'm grading, what I'm looking for. Again, using at least 3 to 5 academic sources. Here it could be articles, books, scholar talks, policy documents, media issues, along with course material that you use to help you develop this topic. And so the paper will be attached just how you did for your reflections. So you can find them if you go to assignments. You'll see here final paper, special topics, and then the presentation goes under discussions. Here's the discussion leader presentation, and then here is the special topics where you will post that. Okay, so please let me know if you have any questions about the project, and if you email them to me, depending on how many questions I get, I might put together another little video next week with just some frequently asked questions or tips as you work on the final project. But the proposals look great. I'm so excited about a lot of the topics that I've seen, so it should be really fruitful for us. Okay, so now on to some reflections about discussion number 5. So for discussion number 5, we read a variety of articles, one about the Lau case, and we read about multilingualism, and then the discrit theory that we read. And so from the discussion 5A, when we were discussing language, so some of the things that really came through in perusal was this discussion of multilingualism as an asset versus a deficit, as we read about in many of the educational settings, and thinking about how we can really foster language as an asset instead of creating schools and replicating schools that, and I learned this term from some of the comments, this erosion of bilingualism. Another thing that really came through, especially in this discrit article, was thinking about how historical exclusion led to mislabeling of students around ability. So this is related to language. This is related to all of these different historical practices that we've read about that have excluded students based on race, ethnicity, identity, and even language status, how that all culminates to this mislabeling that we see and what some of the implications are for that. And a lot of great ideas about how to work against that as well in your comments. And then I saw so much great engagement in the articles about, I wish I could move that, in the articles about the educational debt by Latz and Billings, and then the Linda Darley-Hamming piece about No Child Left Behind. That seemed to really resonate with a lot of you about this era of reform, high stakes standardized testing, accountability, how that impacts the climates of both the schools where you may have gone to when you have been in school and then where you teach in now. One thing that I thought was really interesting was thinking about the big push for No Child Left Behind as a sort of propaganda. And I talked about that a little bit in last week's lecture with the timeline of the reform movement and the publication of this paper, A Nation at Risk, and a lot of the policy discourse that predicated No Child Left Behind and then subsequent reforms, including ones we see today, are built around this discourse of failing and creating this narrative of failing schools and how those contribute to some of the problems in our society. And while we all agree that we don't want schools that are not adequately supporting students, I think it was really clear in your comments in perusal that we have different standards for what we determine as a failing school. I heard a lot of you talk about schools are failing students if they don't center them and if they aren't cultivating them, encouraging them, making a truly student-centered environment that affirms their identity and is really focused on success versus more of a negative or deficit viewpoint that we read about there. So I thought that was really interesting, this discourse around failing, and then even how that impacted teachers and schools and funding and all of these cyclical policies that seem to reproduce and in many cases exacerbate the inequity that we see in schools. And the article about the educational debt really seemed to resonate with many of you, which I was so happy to see, and really complexifying where we are today, both in education and then thinking about all of the different complex social policies, historical events that lead to this culminating debt that we have and owe many of our students and families. And so these articles, so the other thing that I wanted to mention, so while we have moved on from No Child Left Behind and a lot of those, the dominant discourse of failing schools being the problem, we saw that in the Teach for America article as well, we've replaced that with a new discourse around growth. Instead of 100% schools being proficient, we want all students to have growth. And while I think that there's, and this was in a lot of comments as well about the merits of growth and how that is so much more equitable, for those of us who use the MAPS or other growth-based assessments, there still are some of the same assumptions associated with growth, because the way that growth is in the state of Georgia determined is still based on a bell curve. And so statistically, half of students are having adequate growth and the rest of them are not. And so while I think that moving towards growth over failing is a positive thing, we need to make sure that we are not using growth in a way that is punitive and replicates some of the problems that we already identified below, because not all students grow at the same rate. Okay, so moving on to this week's articles. So we sort of have several different topics that we are touching on this week, but they all emanate around this idea of race, power, and invisibility, and then hypervisibility for some groups. And then for our next discussion, we are going to talk about poverty and economic exclusion and how that impacts our geographic cities in terms of gentrification and displacement and the resultant impact on education. So for the first set of articles this week, we are first going to read about Muslim students and how Arab American youth, some experiences that they have. So we have this article, and then there is a YouTube talk by the same author. This one is short. The YouTube video is just about 10 minutes, so you can hear her talk about some of her ideas. I guess that's kind of similar to what you're doing for your special project paper, and then a talk about your work. And then the next article is out of the field of critical whiteness. And so we've talked a lot this course about how groups are marginalized based on race, ethnicity, language status. And the field of critical whiteness really studies a lot of the ideology that justifies some of those behaviors. So this I think will be really helpful for us to understand in part the failure of forced desegregation. So while we had the policies in place, in practice, the way that schools were desegregated in many cases did not support the success of African American students. And in my opinion, that's because we still had this dominant ideology of white superiority that led to a lot of these practices that were not responsive, that in many cases displaced Black educators, having a negative impact on communities. So the field of critical whiteness looks at that and looks at some of the ideologies that many of us white people have from as we grow up, that's part of white culture. Oftentimes white people we don't think that we even have a racial identity, or we don't think that we have culture, but that is not true at all. And so critical whiteness attempts to, even though white people are hyper visible in our society, our identity as a racial group is we attempt to keep it invisible. So critical whiteness attempts to make visible many of the problematic ideologies that white people hold that tend to reproduce a lot of this systemic inequity that we've been reading about in this class. So I do think that this is an important piece to make sure that we are mentioning, because oftentimes when we think about educational reform or what to do, we focus on how to fix the wrongs that have been done and some of the impacts that we see on students and communities. And while that's important, in my view, that's not going to stop happening unless we also dismantle the ideology and the beliefs that white people are superior, which I know there's been a lot of comments on that. And so I think that this will be helpful. So this is a scholar from Critical Whiteness, and there is a talk that she has in the supplemental text. It's longer, 45 minutes. So if you want to listen to that, you can, but her article is with pre-service teachers who are in this. A lot of people talk too about the critical race theory bans and some of the uproar that we've seen recently. So her article this was written way before that backlash, but it is, I think, born out of the same sentiment. So it's called "Why Do You Make Me Hate Myself? Reteaching Whiteness, Abuse, and Love in Urban Teacher Education." So she works with a lot of primarily white pre-service teachers in Colorado, teaching them many of the topics that we've learned about in this course, in addition to the theories. I know most of you are familiar with abolitionist teaching, culturally responsive pedagogy. So she's teaching students about this. And so in this paper, she is writing about some of their resistance to learning about it, and how, like you said, reteaching whiteness, and how white people can use their power and privilege for good in our society. So, and then the last piece I thought was just so interesting. And this came out of educational administration, which we haven't read too much this course about educational leaders. We did a little bit with the Black philosophers, but this piece is like a case study of two principles. Sorry, I got a phone call. Again, thinking about what the experiences of Muslim women in not just schools, but this is about Muslim women leaders. So it's a case study of two principals, and thinking about what their experiences are like and how they navigated the educational space. And hopefully you really enjoy it, because again, it is a little bit more focused on like more of a narrative style where you can read about their experiences. I thought that was a really interesting article. So let me show you briefly what the supplemental texts are, and then I will leave you with our checklist. Okay, so here is that talk with Sharon Matias about critical whiteness and just her own experiences as a Filipino scholar and what that is like. So it's a longer talk, but if you're interested in listening to parts of it, you could always queue it up on YouTube for a commute or something as well. You don't have to listen to it on perusal. Then this article I thought was really interesting as well. So this article is similar to the article that is about the Muslim women principles. This is a qualitative study about high school students in St. Louis, and an experience where they used critical pedagogy after the Mike Brown murder in St. Louis. So this article I thought was really poignant, thinking about a lot of the issues facing students today, where we have heightened violence and police violence, and ways that we can cultivate that with students and really center their experiences. I know that that's been something that has come up a lot in perusal as well. keeping events like this out of the classroom, but this is a counter example of centering the events that are happening and directly talking about them from a critical perspective and positioning students as part of, as citizens who have a voice and can do something about it. And then the last one is, this goes more so with, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even talk about the next set of readings. I'm still on 6A. But this goes with 6B, which I'll go back and talk about, where we're talking about gentrification and displacement. This is some background about race and redlining and housing segregation. That this context, I think, really helps understand some of the geographic and demographic impacts that influence how schools have been resegregated and how resources are accumulated and hoarded in some spaces. Okay, so let me go back to 6B and then I'll give you your checklist. Okay, so 6B is about pathologizing the poor and gentrification. So we've read a lot about racial and ethnic groups, language exclusion, and we have not read too much about how the experiences of students who are on free and reduced lunch, who are living in poverty, experiencing housing instability, experiencing economic exclusion, how they are impacted and how they experience education in the United States. So this first article is about some of the ideas in schools that tend to blame the victim in terms of poverty and economic exclusion, and then thinking about some implications for teachers who are working in high poverty schools. And then the next article has to do with displacement and gentrification, coming home to new homes and new schools, critical race theory, and the new politics of containment. So that's a really interesting piece about policy. And again, I know so many of you are interested in critical race theory, so I thought that that would be a good one. And then also thinking about how our cities change and how that impacts students. And then the last one is a shorter piece. It's written about by a recent Georgia State graduate, along with several teachers here in Atlanta. So this one is called Teachers at the Center, Place in Education Displacement in Southwest Atlanta. So if you're from the area, if you teach in Atlanta, you are going to know exactly where they're talking about. You might even know some of these women because several of them are still teaching. So this article again has they're using a participatory action research lens. So not only are they researching the issue, they are talking about the political action that they are taking to try to foster culturally relevant spaces, to support Black teachers. So I know a lot of you have talked in perusal and in your reflections about being active politically. So I think that this one might be a good one to think about that and even connect with some of these, with some of the authors of the paper. I can help you get their email if you're interested in contacting them. This is just a picture from in the article. They show family home, the Zillow, and then like some text messages, kind of developers trying to buy the home. So those are the articles. And then I already showed you the supplemental text for this week. And a couple of people have asked me for readings about gentrification. If you're interested, I do have several more to send. Okay, so checklist. Ooh, I forgot to edit this page. Okay, so let me fix this. Okay, this is correct. So the Zoom this week is back to Tuesday, July 13th at 5:15. Again, that's optional, but if you want to come for 4 points, you can either apply them to 6A or 6B. That will be on Tuesday. So this Wednesday will be perusal 6A, Sunday is perusal 6B. And then the following week, we will start our final project. First due date is the 20th, and then second due date is the 26th. So you can, again, break up the presentation and the paper however you choose. So I'm looking forward to this week. I am just so enthused by all of your engagement, your assignments, your perusal, annotations, and I am really excited about the special projects as well. So if you haven't come to a Zoom, I would love to have you this Tuesday at 5:15, and please reach out to me via email. I'm available this week if you would like to schedule a Zoom with me as well and talk about anything. Make sure you check your feedback in iCollege and have a great week.